Hello again, Struckweb. Today I'm bringing you another build video for Wolcen Words of Mayhem, and this one I've decided to call Spinception, and I've been playing this setup even in the beta, but in the beta it didn't have that enough resource generation, transfer time and rage cost reduction that we can get in the current version of the game. And it's much stronger now, and basically all it is about is you're spinning, the axes are spinning around you, and there's a ton of winning as a result of this. It's not probably as OP as just using a bleeding edge build, but you can level this up as a Bladestorm spin to win setup pretty easily. You can kind of get that level up done quickly, continue through the campaign and just use the bleeding edge when things require more damage. When you're doing bosses, champions, etc. It can be great. But before I go on, I wanna let you know that I made a big mistake when recording this footage last night. I was doing that build on my stream and I was respecking every now and then, and with the final respec I did not put 2 points, 2 passive points into the most important things. The damage based per unspent rage points and the rage generation on kill. So you would notice that this together with my whack of transfer time reduction between willpower and rage in my gear is resulting in my rage going into overload a lot of the time. In order to restore the name of House Struck, I can go and commit seppuku after making this build to punish my mistake of a noob. With enough transfer time reduction and rage cost reduction together with some resource generation, this build can be much better than what you're seeing. I had a good weapon, that's why you're seeing crits that get close to 500k, but it could be better, and as for that weapon I would be making a guide how to craft some similar weapons or even better ones in the next days. So hope you enjoyed this build, stay tuned. First I'm gonna show you the skills and then the other parts of the build. Let's start by showing you the skills I used for this Spinception build. First we have Wings of Ishmir, then we have Sovereign Shout, then we have Warpath for extra mobility, we've got Bladestorm for the spinning, we've got Juggernaut for absorption and extra damage. Actually I need to spend some points because this leveled up without me noticing, and we've got Bleeding Edge for that damage to bosses. You could either use that Bladestorm just to clear out trash without using the Spinception setup and focusing on the Bladestorm, or you could do the Spinception setup, but at certain difficulty Bladestorm would not be enough to deal with the enemies. You would have to start using Bleeding Edge, even for the little guys, especially if you boost their HP or something like that. Let's go through the skills and tell you different options for different situations. So Wings of Ishmir is a mobility skill and it also gives you rage. I prefer using it like that. Skill loses its cooldown, cost stamina points to use instead, so that means that I've got 4 default stamina points. If you get some extra stamina points you could keep spamming this for extra rage and for extra mobility. Then this one creates a vortex before landing that pulls in enemies within an area of effect. This is great crowd control to pull the enemies closer to your axes, closer to your spins. So you jump and you land on top of the enemies and then you do the axe or do the spins and they get hit. This increased damage, it's probably not that needed, you're not gonna be using that for damage. If you wanna be tanking, maybe increased rep generation. If you wanna be inflicting ailments, you can do that. It's up to you. I just decided to take it because I didn't need the other ones. We don't need cooldown because we don't have cooldown, and you can do stuns if you can get another point. So increase crit hit chance. If you don't need a crit hit chance, take stun. Like that. That's one option. Another option would be to knock back enemies, but it won't go well with the build. Increase fight speed, I really love it. If you don't want increased fight speed, you can do even this. To inflict weakness, to make the enemies do more damage. So weakness no longer makes the enemies take more damage like the beta, it just makes them do less damage. So if you wanna be doing that on bosses, to make sure they're not doing as much damage, or on champions, is a great choice. So one choice would be this version, keep that regeneration. Another choice would be this version with the stuns. Both are good choices. So experiment, see what you like. For the shout, there's many different ways to go on about it. The notes I would suggest not losing would be the regeneration on hit, the all resistance score, the effectiveness, and the block chance. So basically this is not necessary and this is not necessary. So from here on out you customize the build to your liking. If you want faster movement speed while you're spinning, this is the thing. If you want to negate the movement speed debuff of Juggernaut, you can also do that if you use this absorption. You can do that to negate that movement speed. If you want more wife leech, take this one. There's many ways to customize the skill. You can actually have the movement speed and the wife leech, or you can have things like crowd control immunity for a few moments, which is nice. Or you can even do stun, or even frenzy the enemies to make them attack each other. Or you can even afflict weakness together with this one, so you can make the enemies do even less damage. Or even get crit chance score buff. That's not crit chance, that's crit chance score. So for here on out, just pick what you want. I like the stamina regeneration because it gives me 2 extra stamina points. And that means I can jump more with Wings of Vishmir in between. Health globes also is nice if you're going for a health globe build, and eventually this setup would be amazing with the health globe spawning, with some chains maybe instead of the spins, or with chains instead of the warpath. But yeah, up to you how you wanna do this setup. So for warpath, this is what I like. I like the shockwave, I like damage based on block chance, I like increased damage, charge skill to channel for longer, perfect for mobility, grants buff to all resistance for yourself and allies when charging, and increased damage. There's many other things you can do, like block chance while charging or stun, but I'd rather do it that way. Feel free to customize it to your liking. And by the way, increasing movement speed for this skill or movement speed for yourself makes this a bit harder to control, so keep that in mind. For the spins, this is how I like. This is what you need. Can be held to prolong the duration of the skill. Reduces rage cost, increase rage generation from killing enemies with the skill, and then you can get things like increased tick rate upon inflicting a critical hit when you have enough crits over 50%. Then you can take increased crit damage and increased damage. If you don't want that increased crit damage, you can do that. This increases the crit chance not just with Bladestorm but with other things. Or you can do the health globes, or even increase damage per each ailment an enemy has, which can also be very strong if you're going for an ailment stuff. There's different ailment builds. I'm probably gonna do an ailment version of this build later on, so keep that in mind. It would be interesting to make an ailment version of this build with those two skills, Bladestorm and Bleeding Edge, having a note like this one. So this would be fun to test later on. So yeah, check what you want. I've never used this one, Chaining Rat, so I'm not sure how strong those hits are, but I'd rather not lose my other stuff for this one. And I'd rather not make the ticks up quite less often, but this is how I play it myself. Juggernaut. Juggernaut, you want to be absorbing as much as you can to do as much damage as possible. The way this skill works is, you absorb damage as you get hit, and after a certain threshold you unleash all that absorbed damage back to the enemies. What the game does not make clear is about this. It says if shield is recast, it explodes, dealing increased damage. But it doesn't say whether it's better to just wait for the skill to absorb as much and explode on its own, or whether it's better to wait right before it explodes on its own and cast it there to do more damage. So it's not very well worded, and I would like to have some more clarification about this. So I take this one, grants rage when receiving damage. Inflicts portion of your weapon damage on enemies attacking the shield is not needed. So you can take something else like threat if you want. Or you can get something like reduce the rage cost. You can remove that and get this to be cast on allies. Or this for crowd control immunity but less duration. But the way I like playing it is like this. So we have extra absorption here, we have reduced damage from projectiles, we have extra absorption here, and that's by percentage of our Vogue chance, which we can increase with this one here. And we have a reduced cooldown and we have more absorption, so 3 times the absorption, 3 times the extra damage. If you remove this and this, you can take one of those. Like this is a decoy, that would count. This would empty your force shield, and if you have more force shield that's fine, but I barely have any force shield. But yeah, if you have a lot of force shield and you add it, this would be even stronger. So experiment, find your preferred setup for the skill and use it. This is how I play it myself. So Bleeding Edge, the big damage skill of the setup and of the game at the moment. Mostly probably everyone has been making similar setups or anything with Bleeding Edge related. This is how I like to play it. Increase damage, reduce rage cost, increase damage, continues to spin after being thrown for extra 4-second duration, and follows you as you move. But you would see me at certain times, like at the final parts of this build video, where I'm encountering a boss that's that annoying guy with the shield that keeps knocking you back. On those bosses I do this extra wife leech and increase projectile speed, and I remove the follows you. That way I can just stack those axes underneath the enemy, and since he does tend to stand static, I kind of leave a bit and hit and run. Another thing you could experiment with is increased damage per element stack. As I said, this is very strong for certain setups, and you can reach millions of damage with this one if you set it up correctly, to have 30 element stacks, to have maybe Immortal Offering, to be able to apply more than one element. And I'm gonna be experimenting with certain builds in the next days, and I will be unleashing a build like that onto the enemies and releasing it online for everyone to try. But this is my general setup. Of course you can increase the area of effect if you want to, that's also an option. Experiment, find your preferred setup. Another part of the build that people always ask me when I'm playing and streaming is how are you spending your points? Well, I dump points into ferocity to a certain point when my crit chance, attack crit chance is enough. For me enough is between 50-55. I mean, sometimes I would have 57, even 60, depending on my items increasing the ferocity and whatnot. But after I've got enough attack crit chance, I do dump everything into toughness. And at the moment I've got a lot of items increasing ferocity and toughness. That's why those stats might look like a lot to some people. So I'm gonna show you the gear in a moment, but let's talk about another part of the build, the aspects. The aspects of Apocalypse is what could give you extra immunity to damage and a little bit of damage, but overall those would not do as much damage as you would do at the later parts of the game. But while leveling up, they can definitely help you survive on bosses, etc., because you're invulnerable during that time. I like using this one because it's the physical material kind of rent form, so this is what I use. I would not suggest using other ones unless maybe you want to do this one for the support healing kind of setup, so it's up to you what you would pick. But I suggest this one, it goes well with the synergies of the build. So the other thing people would want to know would be the passives. I would show you the passives that were used in this video, because I did get 2 extra points to spend after completing the project for the points. So I would not spend those points until I've explained everything and why I've taken those notes. First of all, I normally when leveling up warriors, I go this route. I take those nodes here and I go all the way to here, and I actually skipped taking those nodes. Those are really important and I didn't take them, and that's why I was missing on my rage in the video. This was a mistake I made last night when respecking, and those are crucial points for the setup. So normally I do this 1, 2, 3, etc. 10 points. This is 10 points. So once you reach those 10 points, you would want to move this tree in such a way that this is above that. This is how I level up a warrior. So you've got 10 points here, then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 15 points. After this, something I could suggest would be to maybe get the crit damage, crit chance and crit chance score for level 18, or maybe you can skip that one and just do this one and that one and do this one later. So at level 17 you would have this, then you would go 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 I think. Actually that should be 25 because the first point you get at level 2. So by level 25 you should be getting this. And then after 25 you should do 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3 to get this one, then 4, 5. Then you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points to get the crit damage. And here comes the fun part. Do you want to get more crit score or do you want to get more resistances? While leveling you wouldn't need that much more resistances, but if you do it like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you don't need it that much, that urgently, then what you do is you need to roll this back like that, and the problem would be that, yeah, this would work. So you roll it like that and then you start 1, 2, 3, 4 points for crit chance, crit damage, etc. And then you can even get this for attack speed. If you want, you can even get this for extra 25 together with this 75 attack speed, up to you. Eventually I would get this one, but for now I don't feel the need for it that much. Then here's where you get shit tons of survivability. And here's another thing I would explain about this and about those nodes. So they only are good if your weapon has a ton of physical. So at this point, if you have problems with the rage cost reduction, you can spend 1, 2, 3, 4 points for this 16 rage cost reduction total, and you can even spend those points here for this rage cost reduction. Then you can do something like this: all resistance HP, block efficiency, all resistance. Block efficiency, all resistance. Then you get crit damage HP, then you get another crit damage HP, and then you get more all resistance score here. This is a great survivability, but you also need this one as soon as you can. So if you want to rush this one, do it like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why I'm not talking about this? Because this is only useful if your weapon has 2 physical damage rolls, 2 material damage rolls I mean. So if your weapon has physical toxic or physical and rent, or rent and toxic together with the built-in physical. So look at my weapon. My weapon has rent damage, toxic damage and whitening. But the whitening is not that much, so with that whitening I've tested it. If I'm using this node, I'm actually not losing damage. Because what this node does is it makes you only being able to do material damage, which is physical, rent and toxic, but it also converts 30% of the frost, fire, whitening and 30% of the aether, sacred and shadow into physical. So I'm losing 70% of this whitening damage and it's gone forever, you cannot get it back. But I'm at least converting 30% of that into physical, so with this setup, with those 2 nodes, it works well. Only if you have enough material damage, like enough rent or toxic. In my case, having that much physical, rent or toxic negates the 70% Wasp Whitening damage. But if your weapon doesn't have that much physical range or toxic, then don't take this note. Keep it in mind, don't take it. This is great if you're using edgy. If you're using the unique edgy axe, take this and take this. And just rush this like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then worry about those other things later. Those things are for later when you need the survivability. Together with those things. So once you've leveled up enough into this, then you move on to take this note and 1, 2, 3 here, then 1, 2 to get that block chance, and then maybe you can even experiment with taking Proud Reprisal to make the enemies take extra weapon damage by hitting you, and also this two-handed weapon damage, crit damage if you're playing with two-hander. Even if you're not playing with two-hander, that's extra crit damage, and you can also get crit damage here. Eventually you might add this extra block chance, and there's more two-handed weapon to add, so there's other stuff like extra rend damage. If you're using a one-handed weapon, you can add the one-handed damage, you can add the two-handed for two-handed weapon. There's a lot of stuff to take here if you want it, depending on what you're using. Do not use this one, I do not suggest it. And other things you might consider if you're having trouble surviving is Second Wind. Health generation kind of got nerfed. This is also great if you can keep getting hits, and if you take this note you might also want to take this note. So that's just some options. There's many options how to keep improving this build. As you can see, I'm level 71, so just don't do the mistake I did last night when respecking. I was tired and I didn't see that I missed those two notes. Those two notes are one of the most important notes for a spin to win build or for any type of warrior build to keep your rage up, no matter the odds. So yeah, take that one, then this is extra 10% rage cost reduction, extra 16% and extra 8% rage cost reduction. Take this one, and I hope this was not too long and unnecessary info, but yeah, now comes some information about the gear. When it comes to the gear I was using, keep in mind my gear was far from perfect. There's many ways where my gear could be better, and I actually, while recording the gameplay part of this, got an item that's a perfect example of something that I'm seeing as the end version of the setup in regards to items. What you really need to know first is heavy helmet, heavy chest piece. Heavy helmet and heavy chest piece will get their resistances doubled by this note. Health regeneration got nerfed, so don't get bruiser, get this. In the armor, again, I didn't have the most optimal sockets. I could have used this one, I got those while farming. So here, instead of that 8 block chance, I would ideally have another defensive 3 socket for another 16% to all resists. But I kept over rolling when rolling for my resists, and I ended up having it like that. You can see I've got health here and health here in the gems. And if you don't have enough HP, do it. If you have plenty of HP and you can survive, then put all resistance score gems or block chance if you need it. If you need the block chance, you can do that too. Just find your balance. What I can tell you is one thing: my build really needs transfer time reduction between willpower and rage, and the only one I had was this one, 31%. So I probably should have replaced this or this gem, or any of those purplish gems. Any of those should probably have been replaced with a gem that gives me transfer time reduction. Transfer time reduction, you can get it from the same gem but in support number 3 rather than support number 1. So I think probably transfer time reduction would be more important than resource generation, but there should be a balance because both resources, both attributes, resource generation and transfer time reduction, are important. But you want transfer time reduction and cooldown here, transfer time reduction and some cooldown here. For Juggernaut and Warpath is the cooldown, and for the Shout, transfer time reduction and cooldown here. What you want here is rage and willpower cost reduction, material damage, resource generation, ferocity. If you can get some extra resistances, would be the preferred outcome. Here again, the same as the other shoulder. If you can't get material damage, get damage, especially if you're not using a weapon with a ton of material damage. Here you want kind of the same stats. If you can get crit chance score, that's fine again, but the same thing applies to the gauntlets as on the shoulders. So toughness is a great bonus as well to have for that extra HP. But what I was focusing on was the maximum amount of resistances I can get on my items. You can see this is 488, 501. This one is a good choice for a bruiser. 427. You can see a ton of resistances. And one thing I want to notify you about is I want to let you know about how this build would be probably min-max this. You get heavy here, and then you get the highest resistance bruiser items you can get with the necessary transfer time, rage cost reduction, material damage, ferocity, etc., resource generation. So you want bruiser here, and in those slots as well. So 6 bruiser with those 2 heavies, and this is a perfect example of a bruiser with high resistance. That way you're getting HP from the bruiser, but you're also getting a ton of resistances. This is an example of a bruiser with more resistance than my heavy items. So this is something I voted while recording the video. So ideally, when you want to be min-maxing the gear, if you want that extra HP stacking, you want bruisers with high resistances on any slot other than the helmet and chest piece because of the passive. But as I said, it's more important to have rage and willpower cost reduction, transfer time reduction, resource generation than that extra damage or material damage. But the resistances definitely help survive. For the weapon, I would be making a guide how to craft a weapon like this one or even a better one. This one is not the best because instead of whitening in there, it should have around 200 plus extra physical damage, which would put the total damage probably around 1100 probably total damage if we have maxed out physical damage row at the bottom. So of course, instead of material status element chance, I would prefer to have something like Wife Leech there. It would be great. I made this weapon myself with crafting, and currently crafting is glitched and gem crafting doesn't work, so you're just relying on RNG. And yeah, upgrading the quality of the weapon didn't do much. From 3 stars to 4 stars, the stats remain the same, so that's probably another thing that's broken. It's not improving the stats. This ring is a great ring while leveling. If you get it, it's level 1 required, even though this one was found at level 121 enemies. It's not ideal, and what you would want would be a steel ring. Steel ring that gives you crit damage at the top, a good amount of crit damage, then it also gives you crit damage at the bottom, then with 1, 2, 3 flat damage types, and you would be going for rent, toxic or physical flat damage, similar to this one here. In here you would want an amulet that gives you all attributes. So you want Omnistar amulet as a base, you want a socket, and you want rent damage, toxic damage, physical damage, you want attack crit chance score, and you want crit hit damage. All resistance scores are also nice, but not really that important for the accessories. In the belt you want the exact same stats. 3 times flat damage, which would be ranged, toxic and physical. You would want crit chance score, you would want crit hit damage. Anything else would be a bonus, like resistance scores, rage generation, material damage, etc. Those are bonuses for all the accessories. But yeah, if you want good rings that don't negate your attack speed, take this. If you're only going for the spin to win and you're not using bleeding edge, what you could do is you could use Ring of the Arbiter. 2 of those would be a good boost for the time being until you find good steel rings. You can see mine is far from perfect. Actually it's complete trash, but it's still better than nothing. And I think this pretty much covers everything. For the legs and boots, again, as I said, you want cooldown, you want transfer time reduction, and you want high resistances. And if you can get crit chance score, maybe some all resistance score, maybe some ferocity, toughness, etc., material damage would be great, but it's not a priority for me right now. I'm focusing on survivability. The damage I'm doing is still enough for now. Later on I'm gonna be min-maxing and getting more damage. So if you have more questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I think I tried to cover everything, but maybe it wasn't enough. So let's show you some more gameplay now. So playing the build is not that difficult. You either can just use the bleeding edge on bosses and the spins for the trash mobs, or when things get tough and the bleeding edge is all you need and you don't need the spins that much, you just precast some bleeding edges and then start spinning and spin around the bosses to make sure they're not hitting you, you're not in front of them. I could have played it much better here if I knew this was the boss. This boss is very annoying if the axe is spinning around you, and as I mentioned in the skills section, for certain cases you might want to make sure that the axe can be spinning on the ground and it's not following you, and that you have some more white leech. So if I knew that was the boss, I would have just before the boss fight kind of changed my skill mods. I do change the skill mods, but later, once I run away and get to a safe distance where I won't get hit while accessing the skills section, the skill mods menu. So yeah, what you would want to do on such bosses, which are not super difficult, but not the easiest to do. It only has 5 million in this difficulty HP, and I can do 400,000, 300,000, close to 500,000 damage sometimes per hit. So I could have just rushed him, spammed some axes underneath him, so as soon as he changed his position, I could have just jumped there, spammed some axes there, and just let him die and moved away from danger. You can see now I'm kind of running away just to find a safe spot to change my skills, because I made the decision, fuck this guy, let's change my skill mods. And yeah, it is needed to have that change for certain cases. But yeah, as I said, it's not that difficult. Make the axe spinning, and they're spinning, then you're spinning, and there's a lot of winning while you're leveling up. That would really help you, but of course make sure to have enough transfer time reduction, resource generation, and to have enough rage cost reduction as well in the gear. That way it would help a lot. The resistances are also important, but keep in mind upkeep is necessary to be using this, especially if you're gonna be using the bleeding edge. But you could see probably in the gameplay videos the previous two maps that some of the other bosses were much easier to do than this guy. And it's much easier to do it like that. You see, I can leave the axes, then I can go away, and eventually the dude would die from all that damage. This guy is actually one of the two overpowered bosses, but there's another one that's much more overpowered, that deals those whitenings with whitening orbs that can even one-shot people with 20,000 resists. And on this build I can actually reach 23,000 resists when there's a lot of enemies around me and I shout with my current gear, the gear you saw in the build video, which is not min-maxed yet. But yeah, with crafting a lot of things can be done, as you can see. The build is probably boring to some people to play because everyone is playing bleeding edge and it's just the skill everyone is playing, but this skill has always been strong. In the alpha I can't remember whether we had bleeding edge, but in the beta, even since the early days of the beta, bleeding edge has been a huge thing. Bleeding edge, retaliator skills have been builds have been very popular in the early beta until they nerfed retaliator with minus 50% crit chance, not crit chance score. Then bleeding edge after the nerf of that retaliator became a skill used for many other builds, and it still did decent damage. If you've enjoyed the video, you can subscribe to my channel to get notified when I upload more content for Wolcen, Torchlight 3, Borderlands 3 or Warhammer Chaosbane. Feel free to also smash the like or dislike buttons, and thank you for watching the video. Keep it cool folks, and until next time, bye.